Hi everybody, I'm very pleased to welcome you to my first ever video series. Now I've never done a video series before. I've done lots of training but not used video, so thanks very much in advance for being patient with me. And I promise that I will learn swanky things in future, like videos with slides, which I have been practicing with, but I'm still not very good. And they kind of zip in from the sides and things like that. But for the moment, it's just me. And actually, you've got no idea how much techie stuff I had to learn just to do this and to not have anything coming out of my head. But anyway, I hope this works. So, I think it's 10, is it 10 or 11? Anyway, it's supposed to be 10, isn't it? Something tangible that I think you need to know now, today, immediately. All women over 40 need to know about their body. So this training session actually will take us back to school, to the field of human biology, with an update on all the latest science, which we all need to know about. The most important thing that I discovered is that we are too ignorant about our bodies, and I keep on repeating this every time, as much as I can. We're too ignorant about our bodies and the phases our bodies go through. And this is because I was absolutely horrified when I found out that I was in perimenopause, because I didn't know anything about it at all, and I really feel that I don't want other women to feel like I did, and as you know, that's really the reason why I put out all this information. So as one of my very favourite doctors, Dr. Sarah Gottfried, who saved my life when I found her in the middle of perimenopause hell, she says, you don't have to fall down a hormonal flight of stairs, but you will if you're not informed or prepared. So we have to woman up. All right, as you know, so that's now my goal, to share all the info I've learned and curated and that I've put into practice since I became perimenopausal. So the biggest, most important thing that I want to share today, because everything cascades from this, it's a question. What's the most important hormone for women and girls to keep balanced all their lives? All their lives. It's cortisol. Now, I know you're going, what? What hormone? Never even heard of it. I call it Director of Emergencies. Okay? It is. Nobody'd ever heard of it. I'd never heard of it. All the times I've asked that in all of my workshops, nobody has ever answered with cortisol. They've all answered estrogen or progesterone, which is what I would have done until I started my quest. So, stress is the #1 modern day issue, all right, like infection was 100 years ago. And stress is controlled by your hormone, cortisol. And most of us don't even know that. And what this does, and why we need to understand it so much, is it shuts down, cortisol hormone shuts down the production of all the other good hormones which you need to function. It's actually there to protect you. And it causes you to function on half of your system so that your energy and focus goes on fighting or fleeing. Now, what does that mean? Well, actually, it means that this hormone, cortisol, stops the production of estrogen, progesterone, and all the other hormones that keep us balanced, happy, non-moody, right? So, progesterone's nature's Valium, testosterone, I can never say that, testosterone and DHEA, which make estrogen. Cortisol stops the rest and digest and repair processes while you sleep, all of which are essential to health. Now, the thing is that what I found really useful is that in the days of our ancestors, hunter-gatherers, if they were chased by a predator like a lion, they would either die or escape. Okay, so they'd see the lion, they'd get that burst of hormone, cortisol, they'd run. If they didn't die, then they would then sit down, have a lovely rest and chat, and then carry on walking around between 12 to 18 miles a day, 19 to 25 kms a day. And then at night, they'd stop to sing and play music and look at the moon and stars. Cortisol would be turned off after they'd finished being chased by the lion. And then their body would be flooded with the feel-good hormones, and the cortisol would be off until there was another emergency. But the problem with our modern day lives is that the cortisol switch, as it were, is on all the time because our lives are so stressful. So basically, emails aren't meant to be like lions, but our bodies haven't evolved, so they think they are. So today many of us never get rid of the negative stresses in our life, and for women particularly, juggling of work and home and children and self-care and older relatives, particularly over 40, family and friends, it can get absolutely exhausting in our modern age. And despite all these gadgets designed to help us, it doesn't get any better actually. So sleep's hard, digestion's hard, repair and rest are hard, you gain weight, you find it harder to lose it once you gain it. And cortisol also stops this hungry, full feeling, which is also, completely forgotten what I was going to say there. And you get the sugar cravings with cortisol. And the reason for that is that because when you imagine you're being chased by a lion, what happens is that your body has very sensibly got to shut down any system that isn't actually essential. And one of the essential systems when you're in a fight or flight situation is you need energy, and you need quick energy to your legs because you're scampering along, running away from this lion. You need quick energy, and that comes in the form of sugar. So any fat storage that you might have are used up while you're fleeing. But the disadvantage is that also cortisol stops your higher order thinking function. Think of it this way: we women, well, actually humans, not just women, have two parts of the brain. Well, actually, we've probably got loads of parts of the brain, but the two bits that I want to talk about is that there's one called the reptilian brain, and that controls breathing, blinking, heartbeat, and the response to fight or flight. You know, that line or that bill that you get sent or the email. And the other part only operates when the reptilian part is turned off. And that's the part of the brain that reminds you why you're on the planet, that you have an important job to do, that you can make a difference in the world. And it helps you make good decisions, behave reasonably, and make sensible choices, such as to stop watching the telly or turn off your phone or not eat another 7 biscuits. Otherwise, we all run around yelling and being unreasonable and overreacting to situations. And doesn't that sound like most of the people on the planet? Sounds like I used to be. Absolutely how I used to be as well. So basically, you're snookered if you're stressed. Now, the difference between negative stress and positive stress, lots of people ask me that. So positive stress, I suppose if you put it that way, is something that, you use to get out of bed, you need that. You need to, go on a hike, and in the olden days, for example, it would help you get up a tree to collect some berries, or you might solve a particularly complicated problem at work. And vitality or energy is what we humans have in abundance, or should have in abundance, right? But many of us do not seem to be firing on all the right number of energy cylinders at the moment, either as individuals or collectively within our societies. And that's not normal. And it's not normal that this constant negative stress you feel all the time, that our ancestors used to just be reserved for the odd battle with a big hairy predator that popped up once in a while. And the rest of the time they were really seriously super relaxed. So the reason I talk about the cortisol first is that you need to understand everybody should learn this at school, but particularly if you're a woman over 40, you need to understand the impact that cortisol has on the production of your other 4 top hormones. And that's the second thing I want to share with you, is what are these 4 other top hormones women need to keep in check. So they are estrogen, progesterone, thyroid, and testosterone. Now there are lots of others, but I'm trying to make sure that you've got information that's easy to digest. So you might have probably heard of 2 or 3 or all of these. Now the production of all of these is controlled by the pituitary gland in the brain, and the boss of the pituitary gland is the hypothalamus, which is also in the brain. And you could really think of that as HQ or HQ central, right? So, and what stunned me when I was learning and understanding all this was that, again, the production of all these is reduced if cortisol is on, because the brain can't do it all. So remember, I'm not a scientist, I'm not a doctor, I'm just an ordinary woman trying to share information which is really important for us to understand and know, so that we can actually use science to help us make really good decisions. Some key things to remember are that progesterone starts lowering in women in their late 20s and estrogen around 35. And that it's the fluctuations of estrogen and progesterone which cause so many of the symptoms of perimenopause and menopause. And do you know why women have testosterone? Any ideas? Most of us don't know. I mean, lots of people have no idea why we actually have testosterone. But actually what's really interesting is you think men and women have the same three hormones, estrogen, progesterone and testosterone, but the balances are very different in our bodies, and that's what makes us different. So testosterone produces the red blood cells, and if this dips too low in women, you can lose energy, confidence, as well as muscle mass and libido. And this hormone receives its marching orders from the luteinizing hormone, I think I'm saying that right, and the follicle stimulating hormone, which are controlled by, guess what, the head gland again. So we have to remember that all of our reproductive hormones are way down the food chain, which is why we need to understand how the brain works so that we can make these really good choices and lifestyle changes. Now, the thyroid is what I'd call the director of operations. So this gland controls all of our metabolism and how quickly the sugar in our cells is turned into energy. And it can be just right, too high or too low. And this dude is line managed by the pituitary, which is in the brain. Well done. So remember I talked to you about the different parts of the brain. So the prefrontal cortex is the thoughtful part of the brain, and that's the one involved in judgment and impulse control and organisation, planning, learning from mistakes, empathy. And when you don't feed your brain right, not only does it not produce enough of these hormones to function properly, it shuts down this better part of our brain. So food is either medicine or poison. And the gut is called the second brain for this reason, because the gut actually contains all the happy and good hormones that turn off or help to turn off cortisol. So if you eat crap, you make your cycle, your PMS and your menopause symptoms much, much worse. Now, the other things that I wanted to share with you, so that was a little bit about the hormones, and you'll be able to tell me if that was too complicated or too much, because the other thing that I realised is that I couldn't remember what a carbohydrate was, what fat was, what protein was, and why we needed them. I really couldn't. I remember, I'm sure I learned when I was about 9, which was a very long time ago. So I think the thing that I wanted to share was, why do we need carbohydrates and what are they? So food messages are a mess. We need all food groups, just remember that. Okay, and what's most important for women is that we have a balance at every single meal of protein, healthy fats and carbs from vegetables. Okay, carbs from vegetables. So carbohydrates are the main source of energy for our body. They're the energy that gets used first before protein and fat. And it's recommended by most sources that about, between, well, it's different, 45 to 70% of our energy intake should come from carbohydrates, and they have lots of important roles. The main things I've said is giving energy, and they provide nutrients for the good bacteria in our intestines to help digest food. They protect our muscles because carbohydrates are the first source of energy for the body, and without it, protein from our muscles is used, meaning that our bodies in effect eat their own muscles. We don't want that, obviously. And the thing that's confusing about carbohydrates is that there was a massive swing towards eating starchy carbs in the 70s and the 80s. And actually, they're even the whole wheat versions, I mean, they're just pretty sugary or pretty processed. And really, the carbohydrates that our body needs is just vegetables. So just eating the rainbow should every meal, some of the rainbows every meal, as long as you don't feel like a horse, should go an awfully long way to making you feel better. Why do we need protein and what is it? So proteins come in many different forms and have got lots and lots of jobs in our bodies. For example, enzymes are proteins which make everything happen. So for example, to break down food for absorption, regulate the entry of nutrients. I've looked all this up actually because I certainly couldn't remember all of this. And to grow, develop, move, reproduce. And hemoglobin is the protein which, with iron, carries oxygen around your body, so clearly that's rather important. And there's also a couple more, myoglobin and elastin, two main proteins in muscle fibres. And bones are mainly proteins with calcium, magnesium and phosphate, so you need protein to build your bones. And last but not least, darling little hormones, which send chemical messages between nerve cells and regulate the metabolism, are made from proteins. So protein for women is absolutely essential at every single meal. And whether you're a vegetarian or whether you're a meat eater, it's the quality of the protein, the quality of all your food that actually counts. So you need to ignore the noise and just stick with things that our grandparents knew well. 3 meals a day, no snacks, healthy fat, healthy protein, healthy carbs every meal. It's actually pretty easy, much harder to do in practice. So why do we need fat? Well, you know, when I was looking up all this to explain in my workshops, it is actually extraordinary what fats do and how women have suffered because of the demonization of fats. So this provides energy for most life functions. And extra calories we don't consume that aren't used immediately are stored in special fat cells for when we need them. And essential fatty acids are these essential acids for growth development and cell functions, but they're not made by the body, so we have to eat them. The most important thing is that the fats are necessary for proper functioning of nerves and the brain, okay? So that they can send the electrical messages. And our brains contain huge amounts of essential fats. But only if we eat properly, and so they're the ones that cause terrible mood problems if we're not, again, eating correctly. So what I really wanted to do with this first video, and again, like I said, you can let me know if I've hit the mark, is explain what it is that hormones actually do and which is the most important hormone for you to understand, which is cortisol. You have to know what the other important hormones are, but the fact that cortisol actually controls whether they're being produced or not. And the second part of I've completely lost track whether it's 10 or 8 or 7 things that I wanted you to know immediately, because this is a little tiny summary, mid-vid. Was about the foods and what they actually are, because if you're like me and many other women I know, it's years since we've remembered or found out or learnt or reminded ourselves as to what the different food groups are and why we need them, because mostly you're driven by the internet or some headline about this or that or the other, and that's not where we should be getting our information from. So as I said, did I? Actually, I can't remember. I've curated over the last 2 years massive amounts of information to put together into hopefully accessible packages for women to digest and to mull over. And one of the other urgent and important things that I wanted to share was why you should track your monthly cycle. And this is one of the questions I have on my my hormone quiz that I do when I'm doing talks or running a workshop. And I never track my monthly cycle. And at first when I read this, I thought, well, why do you need to bother? But actually, I very much regret that I didn't. And I would certainly advocate that everybody does it, whether you're perimenopausal, menopausal, or still having your periods, because it's the best tool for self-care if if you actually understand your monthly cycle properly. And I never tracked my periods. I just used to plough on irregardless. And the ploughing on is one of the things that women do, and it really can stop you getting stressed if you manage your month really, really well. Now, the other thing that I wanted to share was to ask you what you think are the most common medications given to women and girls for hormone symptoms. And it's really interesting to me that actually it's the pill, it's sleeping tablets, antidepressants that are very commonly and actually quite freely given to women and girls for the hormone symptoms, perimenopause, but also terrible period pains. Very, very rarely is there anything about lifestyle or diet or sleep or stress management. And I suppose that's also why I wanted to say to you that because of that, that's another reason I realised that we have to take a grip on our own health. You cannot assume that somebody else is going to be supporting you or encouraging you to make these decisions if you go down the traditional medical route. You have to get a grip on your health, on your own health. And one of the other things that I think it's really interesting to discuss was that one of the questions that again I have is, what did your mother or your aunt or your granny ever tell you about perimenopause and menopause? I mean, most people say, well, they're still waiting, or their mother's dead, and they never said anything. And that's the most common response. So for all of the phases of our lives, only one or two get mentioned. Periods sometimes, and then pregnancy. Now, I think this is number 10. You need to know what some of the most common perimenopause symptoms are, because I really thought I was dying and had early onset Alzheimer's when I was perimenopausal, and I didn't know. And this is part of the being, poorly informed and not being therefore prepared, and to ease off and to take care of yourself when you're going through these symptoms. So if you've got good habits from tracking your periods and taking care of yourself and listening to your body's messages, there's no reason to have terrible perimenopausal symptoms or menopausal symptoms, because usually they are the result of excessive stress from before. But you do need to know what you're looking for. So insomnia is a big one. I mean, there's actually between 35 and 50 symptoms, but I'd say the top 8 really: insomnia, chest pains, brain fog and forgetfulness. And in a sort of scary way, there is no doubt about it. If you were prepared, I think you'd understand and feel a bit better about it. But if you don't know that this is going to happen to you, it is very scary. I remember being very scared because you suddenly start doubting yourself. You lose confidence in your abilities because suddenly you've forgotten how to do things. And so you really, really do need to be prepared. Weight gain is also a big one. You get terrible body aches, crushing fatigue like there's no other, mood swings, and this complete inability to multitask and juggle several things. So I'm going to close with my takeaway message from this video, which is: get informed about your body and your life cycles. Stay informed. Join my site. Join Dr. Sarah Gottfried. Join Pedram Shojai. Join Ellen Dolben. All these wonderful, wonderful people that I've found by trial and error and lots of research, you can join. So please let me know whether this is useful so that I can make it better for the next time I do it and update it. And I hope that you look forward to video 2, which is all about 5 things that women are doing wrong. Not all women, not all of the time, but a lot of women, a lot of the time. And then video 3 will be some of the solutions that I've found over the last 2 years that I've been trialing and testing with my workshops and my online course. And I'm really, really pleased if you managed to get to the end, and look forward to your feedback. Thanks so much. Bye.